I've been driving buses in rural Arizona for over 20 years. Long stretches of desert, empty roads, and the kind of silence that can press into your ears like cotton. You get used to it, learn to entertain yourself with the radio, the low rumble of the engine, the feel of tires on asphalt. But nothing prepared me for what happened that night. It was late September, just past 1 a.m. on Route 76. That stretch doesn't get many passengers even in the day. At night, it's practically ghost town territory. Nothing but cacti, jackrabbits, and the occasional pickup truck speeding toward nowhere. My route ran from Safford to a tiny town called Wilcox, about an hour's drive if traffic's good. That night, it was empty. Not a soul in sight. I remember being tired, too much coffee and not enough sleep, but focused. Driving at night in the desert requires it. That's when I saw her. She stood at the side of the road, right at a stop that hadn't been active in years. We used to service it back in the early 2000s, but the town it served dried up after the mine closed. Still, there she was. Pale blue dress, long dark hair, arms clutching something close to her chest. A purse maybe, or a bundle of clothes. I slowed down, confused. My first thought was that she must have been stranded. Maybe her car broke down. Maybe she was lost. But when I pulled up and opened the doors, she stepped on like she'd done it 100 times before. Didn't say a word. Just nodded, walked past me, and sat halfway down the aisle, right by the window. I glanced in the mirror, trying to get a better look. She sat stiffly, her face turned away from me. No motion, no fidgeting, just still. Something about that made me uneasy. Most passengers, even the quiet ones, shift around. But she sat frozen, like a statue. I cleared my throat. "Where are you headed?" I asked. No answer. Maybe she didn't hear me. I repeated the question, louder this time. Still nothing. I figured maybe she was just shy or tired. So I let it go. The engine groaned as I pulled away from the stop, and we drove on into the dark. 20 minutes passed. The radio started cutting in and out, just static with an occasional word or two bleeding through. At some point, I looked up and realized something strange. I hadn't heard a single sound from her since she boarded. No breathing, no rustling of clothes, no movement at all. I adjusted the mirror again. She was still sitting there, but this time her head was turned toward me. Not fully, just slightly, like she was watching me out of the corner of her eye. My skin went cold. I tried to shake it off. Maybe I was imagining things. Lack of sleep, desert playing tricks on me. But my gut told me something was wrong. Another 10 miles down the road, I looked back again. She was gone. Vanished. I slammed on the brakes, heart racing. Got out of my seat, ran down the aisle. Nothing. Not a trace. The seat where she'd been sitting was empty, untouched. I even checked under the seats, thinking maybe she'd fallen or passed out. The doors hadn't opened. I hadn't stopped. She couldn't have just walked off, unless I drove to the nearest stop, pulled out my phone, and called dispatch. "Can you check the cameras on bus 417? I asked. I think I lost someone." They were quiet for a moment. Then the dispatcher said, "Stand by." I waited. A few minutes later, they came back on. "You sure someone got on your bus?" "Yeah," I said. "Dark-haired woman, pale dress, about 30 maybe, got on at the old Mason stop." Silence. "That stop's been out of service for 10 years. There's no one on the footage, driver. No passenger. You were alone the entire route." I felt the blood drain from my face. "No," I whispered. "She was real. I saw her." The dispatcher didn't say anything for a long time. Then, quietly, she replied, "You're not the first driver to report that." I froze. "What do you mean?" "There've been stories, over the years, about a woman matching that description. Always at the Mason stop. Always late at night. Never shows up on camera." They ended the call after that, told me to finish my route and file a report. I didn't finish the route. I drove straight back to the depot, parked the bus, and sat in my car until the sun came up. That morning, I walked into the station and found a dusty old bulletin board in the back room. Drivers sometimes pin photos or news clippings to it. Local happenings, weather alerts, missing persons. There was a photo pinned to the corner, black and white, faded. It was her. Same pale dress, same long hair. The caption underneath read, "Local woman disappears near Mason Stop, 2003. Last seen boarding a county bus, never arrived at destination." I didn't drive that route again for months, but eventually I had to. And every single time I passed that old stop, I glance in the rearview mirror, just in case. I was 21 when I took a semester abroad in Prague. The city was every bit as magical and eerie as I'd imagined. Cobblestone streets, shadowy alleys, and Gothic buildings that seemed to breathe history. The university arranged a temporary stay at a historic hotel downtown for international students. I was assigned to room 405. From the moment I checked in, something felt off. The hallway was dimly lit and always seemed colder than the rest of the hotel. Room 405 was fine, if a bit dated. But the wall behind my bed, that one shared with room 406, always seemed unnaturally quiet, as if it was absorbing sound. The first whisper came on my second night. I had just dozed off when I suddenly woke up. Something had stirred me. I sat up, heart pounding. It was 3:11 a.m. I remember it exactly because I glanced at the glowing red digits on the old digital clock by the bed. Then I heard it, a whisper. At first, I thought it was someone talking in the hall, but it was too close. It was coming from the wall, a soft, breathy murmur, so faint I had to hold my breath to catch it. I leaned in, my name. It was whispering my name. I jolted back, sat upright the rest of the night with the lamp on. The next day, I told myself I'd imagined it. Maybe I was jet-lagged, maybe it was a dream, but the next night, it happened again. Same time, 3:11 a.m. The whisper clearer this time, almost curious. Emily, it said it again. My name. I bought a recorder the next day, just a cheap one from a tourist shop. I left it running by the wall while I pretended to sleep. The next morning, I played it back. For over 3 hours, nothing. Just static, the occasional creak. Then, right at 3:11, the unmistakable sound of breathing. Then Emily, whispered 3 times, clear, crisp. My name. I took the recorder down to the front desk. I wasn't trying to make a scene, I just wanted someone to explain what the hell was going on in the room next to mine. The receptionist, a thin woman in her 40s with tired eyes, listened patiently. When I said room 406, she stiffened. Her gaze flicked to the older man beside her. They exchanged a glance. Room 406 hasn't been in use for years, she said slowly. We keep it sealed. There was an incident. I asked what kind of incident. The man answered. A young woman stayed there about 15 years ago. She was also a student. From Canada, I think. She died alone. The cleaning staff found her 3 days later. There were no signs of injury, no suicide note. Just her sitting in the corner, staring at the wall. I asked if anyone had ever reported hearing things from that room. They didn't answer. I asked to change rooms. They moved me to the other side of the hotel, near the elevators, far from 406. I tried to forget it, I really did, but the damage was done. Every night after that, I dreamed of walls, narrow spaces, breathing, and always 311, always the same voice. Even after I returned to the US, the dreams followed me. I tried therapy, meditation. I even deleted the recording. But the whisper still comes sometimes, not through walls anymore, but in my dreams. On nights when I can't sleep, on nights when I forget to turn off the light. A few months ago, out of curiosity or maybe something darker, I searched online for room 406. I found a blog post, just a single entry written in broken English. The author claimed to have stayed in room 407 across the hall years earlier. They too heard whispering at 311, but not their name. No, the voice had said Emily. My name. I don't know what happened in that room. I don't know why it still reaches out, but I do know this. That hotel still accepts guests, and room 406 is still sealed. And every now and then, when I lie in bed and the room is silent, I listen. And I wait for the whisper. When my grandfather passed away, I inherited his old house in rural Maine. It sat on the edge of a dense pine forest far from town and hadn't been lived in for nearly a decade. Still, I saw potential. I was recently divorced, between jobs, and honestly just needed a place to clear my head. The house was everything you'd imagine from a New England home built in the 1900s. Creaky floorboards, wallpaper peeling at the edges, a fireplace blackened from years of use. But what struck me most was the photo frame sitting on the mantel. It was a portrait of my grandfather, taken sometime in the 70s. He looked stern, unsmiling, yet oddly watchful, like his eyes followed you around the room. The first night I slept in the house, I noticed something odd. When I woke up, the picture frame had shifted, just a bit, maybe an inch closer to the edge of the mantel. I assumed I had bumped it while cleaning, or maybe vibrations from the storm outside had nudged it. But the next morning, it was closer again. By the fourth night, the frame was teetering on the very edge. I remember staring at it, feeling uneasy. I placed it back to its original spot and wedged a coaster underneath to prevent it from sliding. That night I heard a noise, a thump. I ran downstairs. The picture frame was on the floor, glass shattered, the wood cracked open in the back. I bent down to pick it up, and that's when I saw it. Something tucked inside the frame. A piece of yellowed paper, folded tightly. I unfolded it, expecting maybe an old letter or photo. But instead, in shaky, frantic handwriting, it read, "Leave now. The house remembers." I laughed nervously, thinking it was a joke. Maybe a prank my grandfather played on someone, or on me, even from the grave. But something about the writing chilled me. It was hurried, desperate. I stayed up that night, unable to sleep. Around 3 a.m., I started hearing noises, creaking footsteps upstairs, the sound of something dragging. But I was alone, or at least I thought I was. The next morning, I did some digging. I searched the local library, the town's historical archives, trying to find anything about the house. That's when I found it. The property used to be an asylum in the early 1900s, a private institution for patients with severe mental illness. It was shut down after reports of abuse, neglect, and even mysterious deaths. The building was eventually sold, renovated, and passed down through a few owners until my grandfather bought it. But what shocked me was a photo in the archive. It was a grainy black and white picture of the asylum staff and patients. Sitting on a bench in a hospital gown was my grandfather. I stared at the photo for a long time. The same stern face, the same eyes. He hadn't worked at the asylum. He'd lived there. Suddenly, a lot made sense. His obsession with routines, the way he avoided talking about his past, his constant journaling, always writing something down but never letting anyone read it. When I returned home that evening, the house felt different, heavier, like it was breathing. I tried to convince myself I was imagining things, but that night I heard the whisper. It came from the fireplace, a low, croaking whisper. "You found it." I froze. "You shouldn't have read it." The voice was old, guttural, male. I grabbed the letter and threw it into the fire, watched it curl and blacken and disappear into ash. Whatever warning it held, I wanted no part of it. But that didn't stop it. The next night, the frame was back on the mantel, repaired, no crack, no broken glass, just sitting there, like nothing had happened. And the next night, too. I moved the frame to the attic. It came back. I tossed it in the trash. It came back. I left the house, rented a place in Portland for a few weeks. But when I unpacked my bag, the photo frame was in there. I can't explain how. I don't try anymore. I eventually sold the house, burned every photo of my grandfather I had. But even now, sometimes, I'll hear a thump in the middle of the night, and in the morning, the frame is there, on the mantel, waiting.